return of the Mac. Return of the Mac. It's the return of the Mac. Do. I can't believe nobody has coined that phrase yet when regarding the return of UMass to the Mac. Probably has something to do with the average age of people making videos like this. As a proud Gen Xer, I remember the days when hip-hop was fun and exciting. In any case, UMass has made a full return to the Mid-American Conference. I've seen a lot of speculation about why and what, and a lot of controversy as well. In this video, we're going to talk a little bit about why people are concerned about it, what kind of opportunities there are, and what does it mean for college football overall when it comes to conferences, since there's a lot of conference movement right now. Here we go. Let's do it again. So the reason this is the return of the Mac, or maybe return of UMass, is that back in 2012 to 15, UMass played as a football-only member of the Mid-American Conference. And at the time, UMass decided to move on in 2016. They had an open invite to join as a full member with all their sports, but they decided to move on. We'll talk a little bit about that later. Now, there was some chatter in 2021 that MTSU and WKU, or Western Kentucky, were going to be invited to the Mid-American Conference, but only if they came together. But it's funny because the official word from the MAC commissioner was that an invitation was never extended. To what extent they actually had talks with them, I don't know. But that didn't fall into place. And so we'll just leave that as the rumors, because there's a little bit of discussion about who might also fill out the MAC. And here we are. 2025, UMass now joins or rejoins the MAC from a football perspective, but joins the MAC as a full member with all of their sports. So why now? Why is UMass going to the MAC a good decision now, as opposed to, say, 2015 when they had the other opportunity to do this? It's no secret there is an elephant in the room that everybody's actually talking about. Keith Dambrot, the head coach of Duquesne men's basketball, said everything nowadays is football driven. It's a little hard to understand because it's MAC football. And the A10 commissioner Bernadette McGlade shared that conference realignment has become a constant among Division I institutions. And as we know, that's a lot of that's fueled by football, not always, but for the most part these days. And that Massachusetts has been very transparent with the A10 in its search for an FBS conference. The A10 has been respectful of that need. So that, obviously, the A10 gets it. They didn't really have an answer for them, so this is the result. I think the real hard part for a lot of alumni and fans is that UMass was a founding member of the Atlantic 10 Conference and has been there for 50 years. When you're in some place for 50 years, that's a part of your identity, and it's part of what you believe you are. And so any change like this is, I'm not going to say controversial, but it's definitely makes your head turn a little bit. But, change is hard, and these are definitely modern times, and it requires a little bit of a different mindset. It reminds me of the economic philosophies of Thomas Sowell, who says there are no solutions. Not even that there aren't any perfect solutions. There are no solutions. There's only trade-offs. So let's talk about some of those trade-offs. In 2015, the A10 conference, which the UMass was one of the founding members of, was getting up to 6 schools into the NCAA tourney at a time. I mean, that's pretty impressive, right? And that's pretty good. But since that time, the A10 has lost a step or two. There's no doubt it's a more powerful conference when it comes to college basketball today still, but it's definitely lost a step or two. And you got to think about UMass actually performing well in it. They haven't been to the NCAA tourney since 2014. That's 10 or 11 years already from where we're at, So, their identity as a basketball school may be steeped in tradition, but they certainly haven't done a lot lately. So I'm not really sure what the A10 affiliation's getting you if you're not getting into the tournament, you're not being able to beat these schools. Stability in football right now is seen as one of the paramount things for athletic departments to do. That's obviously what they're trying to do, is they believe that stability in football will also bring stability to the other parts of their programs. Why is UMass a good fit for the MAC? So the UMass chancellor came out and said, as we've talked about before, athletic affiliations via conference is more than just athletics. Although I wonder about that given just all the changes in the conference realignment these days. In any case, the chancellor of UMass made a case for this. He said, look, we're all aligned with these MAC, with the MAC in their institutional missions, meaning that they have the same values and they have the same impact on the communities. UMass is a state-funded school, like most of the schools in the MAC. I think maybe Miami's private. So it really is focused on having similar and like-minded schools. But the pros, obviously, for going to the MAC, as I mentioned earlier, money as a part of the ESPN TV contract. So they get payouts almost up to $2 million a year, which is significant. They're certainly not getting that today. Stability within the conference play and alignment with the other public universities. As I mentioned earlier, the cons kind of goes with, they're going from the 8th ranked basketball conference to the 24th ranked conference. It may be a little bit harder to recruit for basketball or maybe the other sports like field hockey, lacrosse, that kind of a thing. But, that remains to be seen, quite honestly. That who knows what the future brings. That may not be a con so much. And then I think a lot of people talk about cost of travel. Believe it or not, the MAC actually isn't that much bigger than the A10. I think the A10, you still have to fly out to like St. Louis. So they definitely are losing a little bit of rivalries here and there and some of their traditions. And of course, we don't really know all of the impact on all of the other sports, all of the Olympic style sports that the A10 provided. But overall, even on paper, the cons don't look that drastic. By the way, I'd love to hear from anybody who knows a little bit more about the situation than me, either from a UMass alumni perspective, from a UMass perspective, or from a Mid-American Conference. Please put your comments in there. I'd love to kind of hear the inside English about what's going on there and what people are feeling. So why UMass? Why is UMass a good fit? I mean, they definitely are stretching the boundaries a little bit, I would suppose, of the geography. But why is that appealing for them? And John Steinbrecher, the MAC commissioner, talked a little bit about how they can improve and how they've stayed so stable in this ever-changing landscape of college athletics. And just to be reminded, this is the most stable FBS football conference ever. The member makeup has changed very little since they've had it. And in the last 20 years, they're definitely the most stable. But basically, he said a few things, right? If UMass had some objectives, obviously the MAC has some objectives. And he talks a lot about the mindset. He says, I can't think of any other league that makes sense for our institutions to be in than the one they're in. I think if you line it all up, it's probably right. Outside of the autonomy conference, I don't know why you would be anywhere else. I think basically he's talking about that alignment, the like-minded schools. So they have a tight-knit community. They want to focus on efficiency, and then they talked about the schools knowing who they are. So that's some of the things that made it interesting to have UMass in the MAC. He did, however, say how desirable it was to have a flagship institution in the MAC. If you look at most of the MAC schools, they are not the flagship institution, say like a Michigan. There's 3 what we would call directional schools from Michigan in the MAC: Central, Eastern, and Western Michigan, right? But UMass is the flagship university for the state of Massachusetts. That brings a lot of prestige. It brings a lot of support and resources. UMass is a very lucrative and valuable brand, if you will, as a school. And they definitely have a lot of athletic tradition. As I mentioned earlier, football was really good when it came to FCS football. Basketball's had a good history of being good. And by the way, UMass plays Division I hockey, and they're really good. That's one of the reasons the UMass athletic department is a desirable brand, is because they actually bring in a fair amount of money because of Division I hockey. And so they run in the black because of hockey. So that makes them a desirable asset. And, I think for many years when UMass had stepped away from the 2015 invitation, they were hoping that sort of prowess because of hockey and running in the black could have put them in a different position. But here we are in 2025 and they're moving on to the MAC, and I think it's actually a pretty good thing. So it definitely expands the market from Mid-American to really Eastern, right? And so when that TV contract is up for renegotiation, that puts the MAC in a much better position, right? And it's a little bit of insurance for future changes. I don't see a lot of the MAC schools complaining or saying they want to leave, but you definitely got to add. You got to keep adding. You got to keep thinking about how to be progressive in today's athletic world. The press conference where UMass was welcomed into the MAC was extremely enlightening. The athletic director for UMass, Ryan Bamford, was very transparent with the objectives that he shared about why moving to the MAC was a good thing for UMass. He said it was two objectives that really hit the mark for what they needed to do in their athletics department. He said focusing on alignment and focusing on access. And he couched that by saying we need to figure out what we need to do for our athletics department to thrive, not just for right now, but also for the next moment. As all of this change and churn is happening, they need a place to be so they can get enough stability to make the next step up. You know, it reminded me of a quote I had heard a while ago. If you want to jump high, you have to crouch low. If you want to punch, you have to recoil. You have to get stable enough so that you can go as far as you want to go. And those comments kind of made me think about that as a forward-thinking athletic director. So they're not just thinking about today, they're thinking about tomorrow. And what do we need to do to get where we want to go tomorrow? We need some stability. So that's why the MAC is actually a pretty good spot. So as he mentioned, he's like, they were 50 years in the A10. How do we set us up for the next 50 years? The MAC actually met those two objectives for the athletic department for UMass. Not only is it a good thing for football, it's a good thing for the whole of the athletics department. But what about basketball? You know, we're leaving the A10 and it's going to be hard to coach or it's going to be hard to recruit and this is not a good thing. Frank Martin, the head basketball coach, got up at the press conference, again, when they were welcomed to the MAC, and he laid it out for everybody. I love these quotes because he was like, look, man, I'm a basketball coach. I came here to win no matter who we're playing. And he says, we're UMass, man. We're going out there, we're going to play whoever it is in front of us, right? And he's like, let's just play some ball. And then he laid it out for the fans. He said, with all due respect, last year I was the coach here. And when we played some of these long-standing rivalries, nobody came to the games. All right, so the gauntlet is laid out for you UMass fans, right? You can complain about being a basketball school and maybe leaving the A10 is a difficult thing, but you got to back your school if you're going to complain about that. I thought that was really interesting. He said, you know, last year when we started to win some games, attendance started to blow up and we showed up and people started showing up. He said, my job is to help UMass grow. The school leadership believed in me and they haven't lied to me since I've been here. So why would I not believe in their vision right now as what's best for us as a school? You know, he just kind of doubled down and said, I came here to coach at UMass. Yeah, the Atlantic 10 was appealing, but I'm the coach of UMass. And he wants to compete for conference championships. The last quote that I love, I put in there, he says, it's a basketball school, it's a football school, it's UMass. It's not one or the other. We're all in this together. We're all in this to elevate our program so that we can all coexist and enjoy each other's successes. I mean, like, that's a true thought leader, right? Like, that's the kind of experience you want to have at an athletics department, no matter what school you're at. I think they did a really good job of sort of dispelling the myth that UMass is a basketball school and this is a terrible move. So let's take a look at the school profile, as I have in other videos. You know, as we talked about, they're a FBS independent right now. Their enrollment's about 27,000, close to 30,000. That's a pretty big university. It's funny, they're in the 115th TV market in Springfield, but they're like an hour away from Hartford, Connecticut. They're maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours from Boston. So they're smack dab in the middle of some pretty populous areas. When it comes to football, the stadium is within there. It's within what used to be the parameters of an FBS stadium. I think the lowest was 16,000, but they don't enforce those rules anymore. I expect there probably be some upgrades for that. They have 21 athletic programs. I think they're going to have to find some homes, I think, for maybe women's field hockey or something. That shouldn't be a problem. It's interesting, their average attendance for football in 22 was about 10,000, and that's about right for some of the schools that we see upgrading to FBS lately. And as I mentioned, they don't enforce the every 2 years you got to have 16,000 average home game anymore. Their closest MAC member is going to be Buffalo, kind of in that northeast corridor there. That might make for a good rivalry. As I mentioned, they had an FCS national title in 98. They've been runner-up in 2006. And they've been playing football since forever, since kind of the beginning of college football. So they have a lot of good tradition there. Now they have a lot of conference championships at FCS levels. They have 24 men's basketball conference titles. Hopefully they'll be able to get some of that mojo back, but because lately they haven't done that much. And they definitely have a lot of name recognition. People like Julius Erving, Rick Pitino, Tom McLaughlin, John Calipari. And most recently, they were the national champions in men's hockey. That's a big deal. UMass is a lucrative and a valuable brand to be associated with, and obviously the MAC wanted them for specific reasons. From a school profile, they look like they're pretty strong. So how do they compare to the rest of the schools in the MAC? There they are. They're really in line when it comes to population, or at least, the number of students. The most is University of Buffalo, which has 32, and the other, I think the lowest is Toledo at 15, or maybe Akron. It looks like Akron's the smallest, but that makes them one of the bigger schools there, but it's right in line. Kent State's in there, Ohio, Miami of Ohio, Bowling Green, Western's smaller than I thought it would be. Anyways, their TV market, like I said, kind of in line with the others, but they're smack dab in the middle of a lot of metro areas. The stadium obviously is on the low end, but good enough. Let's see here. I said 21 programs. Looks like they would have 19 that would be available for this conference, so they have to find a couple of homes for some of their teams. Their bowl record is 1-1, which is about on par with the rest of the MAC schools. Their men's basketball attendance is about right. They're top tier, maybe not the top, but in the top, 35% of the attendance for other MAC schools, and they match up really well with the other schools when it comes from an athletic perspective. Are they within the 5 hours of every school needs to be within 5 hours of each other? I think pretty close, and certainly they are if flying is a thing now. And as I mentioned in other videos, if you're in FBS football, you're going to have to fly no matter what. It's just it just is what it is. And this is probably one of the tightest geographies of any conference. It's 4 hours, 45 minutes to Akron, 5 hours and 50 minutes drive to Buffalo. So I assume they'll drive. Who knows? They might even fly across state. The longest distance they'll have to go is 984 miles to northern Illinois, and they're already doing that. They're already going to Chicago, and they're going to St. Louis in the A10 as well. So, the distance doesn't seem to be that different. Now, I suppose in the A10, there's a lot more schools where you could drive to it within an hour or two, I suppose. But when it comes right down to it, when it comes down to the time commitment, it's about the same. Here's the new footprint of the Mid-American Conference. It's still the closest conference in a geographic proximity of each other. As you can see now, it's stretched a little bit. We got UMass to NIU, which is just outside of Chicago. You fly to Kent State, you play Akron. You fly to Bowling Green, you play Toledo. You go to Miami, and maybe that's close enough to Ball State or something like that. There's a lot of efficiencies that they can find here as well. I mentioned earlier about the stadium capacities. UMass is definitely the smallest, but they're definitely, my expectation is they'll have some upgrades if they start winning and get some people back into the stands. Well, how does this affect the rest of college football? Will it affect the A10? I know there's been a lot of speculation since the announcement as if it absolutely had to happen. I'm not so sure about that. I think the A10's in a good spot no matter what. It's so funny to look at that map. There's really not that big of a difference between the A10 and the MAC when it comes to distances. I mean, St. Louis is further than Chicago, where NIU is. So I would say it's minimal impact to the A10, though. They're going from 15 to 14, which in some cases makes it more even, right? They don't lose any footprint technically, right? Because they've got Rhode Island there. I guess they do lose a little bit of northern hemisphere, but from a east-west standpoint, they don't lose too much of a footprint. And you know what? There's plenty of replacements available. If you look at other conferences around, if you wanted to replace UMass, there's plenty of schools available who maybe have prowess in basketball who are in that footprint and have the academic standards that they want. The question you have to ask as the A10 member is, was there any damage done to the brand? I mean, you just lost founding member of the conference who's been with them for 50 years. It's the sixth full member loss since 2013. You gotta be worried about that a little bit. But since they have 14 schools, I really don't think there's going to be that much of an impact. And then there were two. So this isn't a trickle-down effect. It's just a consequence that, UMass joined a conference is that there's now 2 independents. But we may find that there's actually a few more. With the implosion of the ACC, who knows what that's going to bring. We don't worry so much about Notre Dame. They've had plenty of money and media connections since the beginning of time. So, they're going to be able to take care of themselves no matter what. It'll be interesting and curious to see where UConn can land itself. I'm sure the Big 12 now is more interesting to them, though it doesn't look like the Big 12 or the ACC is going to be that interested. But we'll see. Here's a look at all the bowl game affiliations that the MAC has. Obviously, this is a very attractive thing for UMass. They now have an opportunity to go to, say, one of 4 guaranteed bowl games if they make a 6-6 record, and then 2 of the contingency bowls. This obviously is a big deal for UMass because if they make it to those bowls, they get more of a national exposure when it comes to football. And of course, it's always exciting to go to bowl, travel across the country for the players. So let's take a look at future speculations for invites to the MAC. So with the addition of UMass to the MAC, that adds a 13th school. You might think that they want to go for an even 14. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. They don't quite have the same money as other conferences. So if you add one more, you're going to have to deal with, splitting less money amongst the schools. But you hear a lot of desire to have even numbers when it comes to conferences. Makes scheduling a little bit easier. So if in the future they want to even that up, here's my future invite speculations. We already know that Western Kentucky wanted to go to the MAC when it was rumored that they had the opportunity to do so. They were, from what I can understand, they were kind of upset with MTSU's decision to stay in Conference USA. But you know what? That actually worked out for them. Conference USA in the last couple of years really elevated itself with its play. Another school that's actually a really good fit there is Eastern Kentucky. They've made it very clear that they want to play FBS football, and they're within that MAC footprint. EKU is actually just a little bit north of Western Kentucky and is closer to the geographic footprint of the MAC today. They've got all of their ducks in a row as far as taking the step up. They got a decent stadium. They've got alumni power. They've got tradition of being competitive. I don't know if they're exactly a top tier program, but they're definitely gunning for FBS level. There's Austin P, which is also right there in the geography and has some pretty good facilities. And then, of course, Youngstown State, which is right inside the MAC in the same geography as Akron and Kent State. And that would fit, again, from a geography standpoint. They have some decent facilities, but I think they'd probably have a little bit to go up. What I might consider the tier 2s are places like Chattanooga, who definitely have all their ducks in a row when it comes to being able to take a step up. Central Arkansas has, postured here and there with different conferences. Murray State also there. Southern Illinois and Illinois State. I heard a rumor that Missouri State would be interested, but they're a little bit outside that self-contained group that's in the MAC. I've heard a lot of NDSU and SDSU, and I just think that's way too far off the radar. Now, Dayton would be an interesting one. Dayton plays football in the Pioneer League, which means that they'd have to ask scholarships in general. And they're probably not poised for that, but they're definitely within the geographic footprint. And then Northern Iowa has a great tradition at the FCS level, and they have a decent sized stadium and backing. That could be a possibility. But if I were to put my money on a school or two, it would definitely have to be with Western Kentucky or Eastern Kentucky. I just think they both have the desire to go to FBS. They have a situation that's similar to the other MAC schools, and they're pretty close. So that might be interesting to see. One last highlight that's been brought up a few times already is to note that the closest MAC member is Buffalo. And ironically, they actually are located in a town called Amherst, which is exactly where UMass is, just in different states. These two schools actually match up really well. They're both flagship state universities. They're about the same size, and they have quite a bit of winning traditions for all kinds of their sports. And they're about 400 miles away, and they're both top academically ranked school. I think Buffalo is a AAU school, which is good enough for the Big Ten. And I think UMass obviously is top academically ranked. That seems to have some promise as a new rivalry, and that could be fun to watch. So there's the rundown for the return of the MAC, return of the MAC, return of UMass to the Mac. It's going to be exciting. I think it's fun. I think it's a good development. And I actually think these Group of Five conferences are the ones that are going to keep the spirit of college football alive. I think they're going to actually be really fun to watch. So once again, would love to hear your comments and your inside knowledge. Certainly, I don't know everything that's going on, so I'm happy to people's points of view. And if you have inside information, please post it as best you can. Looking forward to another crazy college football season next year.